Hi, this is Rose. And before we begin, have you charged like a bull?
Meet Rose Odette, tech trailblazer, EMR pioneer, and $100 million founder. Her book, Charge Like a Bull, unveils 7 strategies to scale without investors, crush your limits, dominate emerging markets, forge unstoppable alliances. Ready to break through? Get your copy on Amazon now.
Hey, grab your copy of Charge Like a Bull and Charge Like a Bull game plan book. You don't need book 1 to get the game plan book. Skip that 450 pages if you want to get right to work like I usually do. They'll both be out on Amazon waiting for you, and you'll find the link in the show notes. And a sneak peek, if you're more into Audible books, the Audible book will be ready at the end of June of 2025, and I've already listened to the first 30 minutes, and it's amazing. I did not narrate it. I hired a professional actor to narrate it, and thank God I did. Anyway, see you in the podcast. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Bullish on Business podcast. Today's guest is someone I've been really looking forward to meeting on the podcast and getting to know better. We had a plan for him to join us before, but my bad, all my fault. But life kind of got in the way. My banker got in the way, and I wasn't going to miss the second chance. He gave me a second chance. Thank you, Jordan, for that. Joining us really for the first time on the Bullish for Business podcast is Jordan Lawrence, a respected voice in the EB5 investment world. Jordan works at the intersection of global investors and the United States economic growth, helping families secure a future in America while the projects that create jobs and opportunity. And I always talk about this investment in Visa space. It's like, what a great product that we sell. We're selling in the United States of America. I can't imagine. It's like my favorite product in the world to talk about is our homeland, and I love that. If you've ever wondered how EB5 works, why it's such a powerful vehicle for immigration and business growth, or what investors really need to know to succeed in this place, you're going to love today's conversation. Jordan brings not only expertise, but also clarity, breaking down a complex process into practical insights. This episode is all about opportunity, the opportunity for immigrant investors, for American businesses, and for the communities that benefit from all this job creation. So let's dive in and welcome the very first time on Bullish on Business, Jordan Lawrence.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Rose. It's a pleasure to be joining today and speaking with you, and happy to discuss this program and how it's benefited our country, how it can benefit investors, developers, et cetera. It's a very interesting segment of U.S. immigration and also just daily life that you probably drive past projects that you'd never even know had EB5 funding in it. So once again, very grateful for you to have me on and to discuss all this.
Awesome. Well, I just want to bring up front, so if you want to write something down, write down this, guys. My viewers and our guest is, his website is mentioned. So I want you to write down EB5AN. That's the company, the regional center name, and then the URL will be in the show notes. But those of you who just can't wait, it's https://eb5visainvestments.com. Again, that's https://eb5visainvestments.com. All right, let's get into it. Jordan, what is an EB5 visa?
That's a good question. And I thank you. I'll have to leave now. No, I'm kidding. Can't answer that one. So the EB5 visa is a path for foreign investors who are either abroad or here in the US on different type of visas to obtain first conditional residency, which later converts to permanent residency. And in order to qualify for the program, they need to make an $800,000 investment into either a rural area project, high unemployment area project, which are typically urban deals, or infrastructure. Or if they're in neither or none of those categories, it's a $1,050,000 investment. It goes into what we call new commercial enterprises. NCEs is the jargon in the industry. Those funds are then either invested or loaned to specific projects. Typically, what you see is real estate developments, and we can explain more on that and why in a moment. But then these projects use the capital, they create jobs through expenditures, whether it's the construction jobs, jobs in producing construction materials, transporting them to the site, jobs brought to the region, which are induced jobs, just by virtue of the project. In exchange for having clean source of funds, so Uncle Sam wants to see they didn't get the money from narcotics trafficking, terroristic activities, but even taking away those extreme cases, they need to see a clean trace of the origin. So did you earn this money lawfully? Were you paying taxes on it? Do you have clean records? And it's a pretty thorough vetting process. That's what the immigration attorneys specialize in. And they clear that hurdle. They go into a project that was pre-approved by USCIS, and then they get a conditional green card. And then years down the road, when they file the petition to remove conditions from that green card based upon the job creating evidence, which we've had 100% success in, then they
Oh,
convert to
sweet.
permanent green cards. And this is for the applicant, the spouse of the applicant, and unmarried children under the age of 21. So that in a nutshell is what the EB5 program provides.
What a wonderful program compared to so many others. How does it, how quickly can someone get their green card?
Yeah, much more quickly than some programs. For rural projects, which have priority processing, because the government wanted to incentivize development in those rural areas, it depends upon their country of birth and whether they will be backlogged. Right now, dates are all current, but at some point in the future, India and China will very likely be backlogged and face extended waits. But in general, for rural, 1 to 2 years for the conditional green card. High unemployment, 2 to 3 years. Yes, we have outliers that are much sooner than that. We just always want to be conservative. And we don't, I'd be
Absolutely.
happy to be proven wrong in this direction where they get it more
Right.
quickly rather than not getting it as quickly as we expected. Now, for Indians and Chinese applicants, when the dates move backwards, that's where they're going to face extended wait times. We don't know how bad it's going to be, but happy to always discuss that in detail with the clients. I would say for someone applying today, if they get unlucky in our backlog, probably about 2 to 4 years for rural for an Indian or Chinese applicant. And for high unemployment, probably about 6 to 7 years because there is a lot of demand from India and China.
Right.
So if you're not from those countries, you'll probably be fine and just have the normal processing.
Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up. Now, we talked about the countries. What about the person? Who is this really for?
Well, it's for anyone who wants to be a resident and doesn't want to go through other viable paths or maybe paths, like you said, take longer. I would say the bulk of the market has always been China, Chinese nationals, either those who are on F1s here, they're facing difficulty in getting H1Bs. Sometimes there's a lot of money coming from abroad and foreign applicants. And by foreign, I just mean residing outside of the US.
Mhm.
A ton of applicants right now are H1B holders, specifically Indians who are facing, I mean, 100+ year projected waits for their EB2 and EB3 green card. So if they can cut that down by a significant fraction, they're looking to do that. They've been earning good money. Funds are typically earned here in the US, clean paper trails of that. But then there's investors from all other countries, Mexico, Latin America, you have Europe, Canada, Africa, Middle East. A lot of people will do it for themselves, but a lot of people will do it for children too, maybe easier access to studying at universities in the US or graduate studies, or maybe employment opportunities after. because we all know it, and especially as administrations change, sometimes it gets very difficult to procure visas or obtain residency. The one good thing about EB5 is it's a bipartisan program that's always been passed by both Democrats and Republicans. Has immigration aspect to it, so Democrats typically are behind it, but it also has money and job creation behind it, and it doesn't cost U.S. taxpayers a dime, so Republicans get behind it,
So
and
it's a
even
win-win.
it's a win-win. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So tell us what a regional center is and what they do.
Sure. So the simplest way to view regional centers is like fund managers that have this quasi-immigration aspect to it. So what we do is provide the investment opportunities, be it a debt structure, an equity structure. Clients have their choice. Right now we have, I think, 7 or 8 different projects that they could choose from, uh, varying from rural to high unemployment categories. But essentially, the investor works with us from the investment perspective. We provide all the project documentation the attorney needs to file their immigrant petition, and the attorney includes biographicals and source of funds information. And then we get that capital. We either loan it out as debt or invest it as equity into specific projects that we vetted and filed with USCIS for approvals. And then we're making sure developers are staying compliant with that capital. They're abiding by all covenants and restrictions. Worst case scenario, if there's ever a default and they're in a debt model, which are typically safer for the investment perspective, then we're pursuing the collateral that they secured the loan with. Because just like if you're getting a loan from a bank to buy a house, that bank's going to mortgage that house. And if you don't repay them, you stop paying your mortgage, they're going to take it back, liquidate to recover their capital. Same kind of analogy here. We always secure the loans to projects with collateral from the developers. And then we're also tracking job creation throughout the project to provide those final immigration documents that the attorney needs to remove the conditions. So
Well,
that
I
in a
can
nutshell
see
is what we
why
do.
a regional center adds so much value to this whole process. And so how many investors go through regional centers via rather than doing it sort of on their own? Because people can sort of go it alone on these EB5s. But I know I think most people go through a regional center
Mhm.
like EB5AN. Isn't that true?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Typically, 95% of the market is going through regional centers. And I mean, every year there's billions of dollars pouring in. There are one-off investors who do what we call direct or standalone investments, and it can make a lot of sense for a specific person. I come from a family that always had businesses ourselves. I have that entrepreneurial bug in me, so I get why a lot of people will inquire about it. The the reality is that direct and standalone investments, they have higher denial rates, and the job creation is much more strict. With directs, you have to have 10 W-2s. You
Oh,
can't sustain them for any less than 2 years, or you're not going to get the permanent green card. And operating businesses is very difficult, risky, and payroll alone is just very expensive these days. Whereas regional centers, the job creation is mainly through construction expenditures. And that's why you typically see real estate developments, because if you're building $100, $200 million project, you're raising 50, 70, $80 million of EB5 for it. Based upon spending that money as well as the developer's capital, maybe if there's any other debt in the project, it will create far more jobs than are needed for each
wow.
EB5 investor. So it's safer from an immigration perspective. And that's why most clients will go regional center routes.
Right.
And typically with real estate, you always have at least some value to that asset. So it's easier to recover capital if there is a loss or default.
Awesome. Well, I love that. You did such a nice job. So, what's the ratio projects to how many projects and regions and investors do you guys work with?
Lot. Too many to keep track of, fortunately and unfortunately. We've, just to give you perspective, since 2022, we've raised more than $1 billion. So when the
What?
new
Is
program,
that
yeah,
with a B?
with a B, with a
Okay.
capital B. Yeah, it's
Wow.
we've had a lot of growth since then. We've helped about 1,700 applicants by this point. I would say the majority of that volume is going into rural. Rural projects are typically going to be larger at scale, mainly residential oriented. Sometimes you see resorts as well. Um, and urban projects, high unemployment, we always have a few of those available too. We like to have a diverse portfolio, and we never want to push an investor into one project or category or the other. Always their decision. We just want to make sure that they're looking at it transparently and making an informed decision. I will say for Indians and Chinese applicants, the vast majority of them are doing rural because it's going to be the quicker path for them getting a green
Right.
card. Now, for the Mexican investor or Canadian or Israeli, if they get a green card in 2 or 3 years as opposed to 1 to 2 years, or maybe if they're here in the US adjusting their status, what's the big deal? They're fine waiting a bit longer. And the main reason that they'll do that going into high unemployment projects is they'll typically repay sooner than rural projects. So yeah, we have projects, both categories, equity, debt, if they're looking for higher returns or safer placements, because we just like you, if you go out shopping, you want to have a good amount of options so that you can make the best decision for yourself.
Fantastic. Well, and my daughter is an immigration attorney working in the EB5 space, and it's so good to have a regional center that works hand in hand with you because it is a complex process, as you guys listening can tell. I mean, already, thank goodness Jordan's here breaking it down for us and making it make sense. And you are doing a fantastic job of making something that's so complicated pretty straightforward, and I do appreciate that. So, what is the investor's journey like? Well, how do they find out about you, and what's their kind of journey? Where do they begin, and how does that all look?
Yeah, so most people just they fill out a inquiry on our website, they'll schedule a call with us, and I would say most people at that point in time, maybe heard about EB5 a few times and they're doing some research. And if you take a look at our website, we got a ton of resources and content out there. So it's kind of like a database or a library, I should say, of information. And then they'll speak with us. They typically don't have an attorney already engaged. Sometimes they do, and they know they're doing EB5. And it's really just making sure they're aware of the process, the steps they would need to take, the timelines, maybe if they have certain countries of birth, like we explained earlier, making sure they're aware of the realistic timelines, and then walking them through the projects and saying, this is what we have available. Here are the different advantages, disadvantages. Here are the risks with this. And then just answering any questions that they have. At the end of the day, this is always their decision. We're not forcing them to do anything, not putting a gun to anybody's head, and we want them to make a good decision. So we're here to provide as much information as they need to ultimately select the best project for them.
Now, do they have to live where their project is?
No, ma'am. Common question. You could live in Alaska and invest in a project in Key West, Florida. Has no implication.
How often does an investor have to get involved with the project if they work with you?
These are limited partnership structures. So they're limited partners into an LP, very passive involvement. There's no active management of the fund or of the development. So they're essentially just silent investors investing and obviously getting updates, and we keep them as informed as they want to be, typically quarterly updates, but I have people call me every single day who are past investors asking questions, and I'm always happy to answer them. But
It's
yeah,
not needed. It's not like they have to like sign anything or be
correct.
a part of it or vote. Question about the whole challenges, what kind of challenges do you guys run into so that everything like we've talked about is kind of complicated. Where do the hiccups start, and what do you do about that? Like if you get a challenge and there's some kind of hiccup in the process.
Sure. Well, from immigration perspective, the two different stages that they're either going to have issues or success in are the 526E, which are the conditional green card stages, and then the 829, which is the conditions to, or the petition to remove conditions and get them the permanent green card. 526, USCIS is really just looking at whether that project has had its approval yet, which we've had 100% success in. We
Some,
filed about 40 of them. And then they look at source of funds. That's where you typically see issues or denials in the industry. And then 829 stage, that's where job creation comes into play. Again, we've had 100% success. The hiccups that you'll see on that are maybe projects that don't have a very significant buffer, meaning let's say they only need 1,000 jobs to be created and the project
only,
projects only. Again, remember, it's based upon spending money. And typically, if
wow,
you're spending about $1 million, that creates about 10 jobs.
right.
So, $100 million project should easily create 1,000. But let's say the project only projects to create 1,100. And let's say it's not under construction, it doesn't have all the permits. You run into issues that there might not be the jobs created by the point the investors need them. Now, luckily, we haven't had to deal with this or any project denials. And the reason why is one, we're very conservative with how we structure these and file with the USCIS. But two, we finance deals that are under construction. They don't need the EB5 capital. They are fully capitalized, fully permitted. They use
Mhm.
EB5 to either lower their cost basis or have more flexible financing in it. But these are projects that are already self-sufficient, they're profitable, and if there's barring any crazy catastrophe or meteor hitting the site, there should be no reason why these projects stall and don't create the required number of jobs. So that's typically where you see issues is regional centers raising money for projects that haven't broken ground yet,
Mhm.
that maybe don't have all the permits and entitlements needed.
Mhm.
And then going back to project approvals from regional centers, the industry approval rates are very high. Sometimes there are one-off denials, which could be due to a variety of different reasons. But the biggest hiccup that an investor will face from immigration perspective is just source of funds. Like how clean is your money? What paper trails do you have? Government wants to comb through it with a fine-tooth comb. So it's can be difficult and strenuous. And then obviously the big $800,000 question is the security of the capital. That is a topic we could spend hours discussing in and of itself, but there is risk associated with this program. No one can personally guarantee an investor they will be repaid their capital. So then it becomes questions of how viable is this project? What are past performances looking like? How profitable is it? And then, as I mentioned earlier, if they're in a debt model and there's collateral securing the loan, well, what's the value of that collateral today? Is it already worth more than my loan amount, or does it have to grow in the future to cover my loan amount? And then you can kind of do some due diligence and analysis saying, all right, if base case scenario happens or worst case scenario happens, what's my likelihood of getting repaid? But I want to be very transparent, as we are with all of our clients. There is risk associated with this program that investors need to be aware of.
Thank you for that. That's really, really, because everything has, I mean, anything in life has challenges, and you've been very clear and honest and upfront with the things that could go wrong. And I totally appreciate that, and I totally respect you for that explanation. So, everyone likes a story, a good, happy ending. Do you have any happy investor stories that come to mind that you could share with our audience today?
I would hope so. Nothing but bad news over here in US immigration. Of course, we do. I mean, seeing investors always send you their approval notices and the emojis that they'll send, it definitely it brightens your day because it's tough. It's a very competitive industry. Some people don't necessarily have the highest standards in terms of selling or how they market themselves or just being honest about the situations. So it can be difficult, but always seeing people show you their approval notices or, hey, I got a green card is great. I think it's kind of going back to one of my earlier points. The the best thing that I probably called to mind recently is had an Indian investor in one of our projects. And when I first started speaking to him, it was evident that there will be a back. It's going to happen eventually. It's not a matter of when, it's just if. Or excuse me, not a matter of if, it's when.
Right.
And I think I had told him back when I first spoke, yeah, you might get lucky and get it in a year, year and a half. But if you're backlogged, be prepared for 2.5 to 3.5 years. And he let me know a month ago that he got it in 9 months. So yeah, so it's good seeing news like that. Again, I'm happy to chew crud and be proven wrong in this manner. The other manner would be difficult to sleep with. If I was telling people you're going to get it in 9 months, and they end up
Yeah.
waiting 3, 4 years, that's not fair. That's not fair to
No, you want
them.
to what do they call it? You under promise and over deliver, right?
Exactly.
That's always a good thing. Well, the thing I love helping people solve problems, and I love the United States of America. I was born and raised here, and when I started working in this EB5 space, I was like, "Oh, I have the best product in the world, and that's the USA." And bringing people here that are going to create jobs, which I'm like you. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I have been one for many years. So it's so fun to see this happen. And I know we've got to be really clear. This is complicated, and that it's not, those for the faint of heart. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're bringing jobs to the United States and giving people an opportunity to live here and work here and raise their family here, go to college here. And the thing I think is so cool is that, with all this havoc going on with the F1s, the visa for the students, I'm under the impression that the EB5 may be even a better alternative because they're able to pick whatever school they want to go to. They
Mhm.
don't have to go to Harvard or Stanford or Columbia. They can go to, whatever one they choose to. They may change their mind. They may want to do something a lot more flexible. Don't you think so?
Of course, yeah. Some people are doing it, preventing their children from aging out. I mean, like if you moved here and your child was born a year later, or excuse me, a year before, 2 years before, and they've been brought up here, they're American. In my eyes, they're American. They might not have a green card yet or a passport yet, but they're American. And now they're 18, 19. They still haven't gotten their employment-based green card. They're having difficulty getting access to admissions and universities. So some people do it for just that purpose.
Right. I
I
think
want
that's a
them to go to
great, wow.
exactly. And then some
And then
people are
you're
just
doing it for your family. I mean, there's just so
exactly.
many amazing things with this, and I love your success stories. Thank you. So let's talk about trends. Like, I'm a trend spotter. I like to see what's happening. The thing I think is so interesting right now, when I worked for IBM, they made us watch and read every single Megatrends book that came out. And so I became addicted to Megatrends. And I'm sure you know that a mega trend in the world right now is people moving and migration. You can't get on a plane today without it being oversold. People are moving, moving, they're migrating all over the place. So that's a trend. So what countries, I know you mentioned India and China, obviously they're our busiest. What other countries are you seeing a lot of movement into the United States from?
Oddly enough, Canada, seen a good amount of Canadians. Latin America has always been a pretty strong market. Nowhere it pales in comparison to India and China. I mean, India and China probably collectively account for 80% of the
Yeah.
volume, 75% of the volume. Good amount of Europeans, some Israelis here and there, Africans. Africa is interesting because there is a lot of money and wealth there, but it's so dependent upon currency fluctuations. For example, Nigeria, there's a lot of people who have the money to do it, but if they liquidate now and get the dollars, and they're taking a what, 40, 60% cut on what it would have been 5 years ago. And obviously, like the human condition in us is let's wait and see this rebound. And it might go
Right.
further down. Um, South Korea has always been a pretty steady market too, for EB5. And it's interesting because as you see geopolitical issues happen in certain parts of the world, you'll then get a bunch of phone calls from that region. So whether it materializes or things kind of subside and die down, it's just case by case. But yeah, I would say those other countries we're getting a good amount of volume out of too.
So I'm going to dovetail into something that my audience loves, and that is learning about you as a person, Jordan. My goodness, you're talking about foreign currency. You're talking about immigration. You're talking about building huge buildings and projects and real estate. And my gosh, the skills that you must had to acquire or acquired on the job. Tell us your journey a little bit. How did you end up at EB5AN in this regional center? Tell us your story.
Well, thank you for the kind remarks. I'll have to get this recording and share it with my wife, so it can make my head even bigger. But thank you for that.
It's
So,
true. Complex.
yeah, I grew up, like I said earlier, had a family that always had different businesses, restaurants, car washes, then real estate. And so I, when I was in university, I studied real estate finance and entrepreneur management at double degrees. And I knew that I wanted to go work with a developer out of school. I had worked with some real estate investment shops while interning, and I was fascinated by it. And obviously, there's a lot of zeros behind those numbers. And so everything gets exponentially bigger, and it was captivating. And then I saw some projects that those shops were working on with developers, and it it irked and not irked, it stirred that entrepreneurial bug in me, saying, "Well, how do people do this? How do they see a raw piece of land and know that they can put up $100 million and make $30 million on it?" And it just I kind of like the puppet master or grand chess master, analogy. And so I went to work with a developer out of school, and that developer actually had an EB5 component of their company, whereas we're just a lending company. We're third party regional center. We're not owners or affiliated with the developments. And this other company I worked for previously, they were the owners of their project. Really good company, nothing but the highest regards to say of them. And I started off with just being an underwriter and analyst, and looking at the developments and helping out however they could. And then when the pandemic hit, things slowed down a bit. I was just always saying, what can I do to help you guys out more? What can I learn? I just want to be an asset to the team, just trying to earn my stripes. And they taught me about this program called EB5 and how they raise money for their deals. And so I just started reading a lot and had a really good mentor, and learned as much as I could. And then eventually ended up being director of operations of that regional center, putting the offerings together, leading the sales team, going out and marketing them, and completing our projects. And then over the years, I got to know the principals at EB5AN and some of my now colleagues, and yeah, eventually did make that leap of faith, and very happy that I joined. And
Well,
again,
I'm very impressed with your organization too. I love their website, your website. I've learned a lot by just looking through it, and you really give a lot of guidance. So if you guys are looking to just learn, definitely check the website out, because they've done a lot of really good, breaking it down so it's not complicated, even though it is complicated. Okay, so let's get out our crystal ball and let's talk about the future. What do you think? I mean, I know you're not a fortune teller, but tell us as much as you can. Yes. What do you think is going to happen in the next 12 to 36 months in this space? What do you see on the horizon?
sure. So just looking out out our window. We have the EB5 program reauthorized until September of 2027. Historically, the program had been reauthorized for 5 years. There's periods where it was reauthorized for months and would continually be reauthorized. But when the program was updated and reauthorized back in 2022, it was for a 5 year period. And that comes due in September 2027. Now, what happens after that? Will I be looking for a new job? Not worried about that. I'm very confident the program will be reauthorized. Might go through a lapse where they update it, have new measures and protections, kind of like back in 21, 22, where there was a lapse and they updated the program, created these new set aside categories, grandfathering provisions, priority processing, etc. So that might happen, but very confident it will be reauthorized. The other deadline that we have is September 2027 is when the program's either going to expire or be reauthorized before then and continue. Now, September 2026 is the grandfathering date. So if you file your petition before September 2026, even if the program goes away, even if it lapses, they'll continue to process the investors. So
Okay.
from now until about 12 months, not a lot of sleep. It's going to be very busy because everybody's going to be rushing to get in with that protection. And then from September 26 to 27, I think there's going to be a ton of lobbying efforts to get a new bill passed for reauthorization. Hopefully that happens before it expires so we don't experience a period of lapse. But again, this program brings in billions of dollars every single year. It funds construction projects that, and anyone who's listening to this has, I would venture to say, has passed at least one project in their life or on their commute to work. Creates jobs for us Americans, non-taxpayer stimulus, and it can be a very viable path. Yes, there are risks, immigration and investment, but there are a lot of good groups in this industry, a lot of good projects, and I think our congressmen and women know that taking away billions of dollars at a time when capital is expensive, the labor market isn't exactly where people would want it to be, cost of living is expensive. So I think just taking out that injection might not be the best strategy. So we'll see. I'm not always right, as my wife would say. So we'll see.
Well, I appreciate you've lived through a lot of change already and your experience through the 2022 legal changes as well as, the 1 month, 2 month, 5 years, so you definitely have the experience to give us an idea of what's going on. I told you prior to the show that I had gone down to the Miami EB5 versus Gold Card 1.5 day conference. And there was a panel there that talked about the Gold Card versus the EB5. And it was so funny because this is just my perspective, but I don't know if you remember back in 2015 when Trump first started his run for president, every single broadcaster and every news outlet was like, no way, he's never going to win. That's not going to happen. Never going to happen. And I have to tell you that the panel that they had talking about the Gold Card, they were like, no way, never going to happen. That's not going to happen. No way. And I just thought, this sounds familiar. And
Yeah.
so the moderator said, let's switch it around. Let's say it does happen. What do you think? And everyone was pretty much gobsmacked. They were just like, not ready, in my opinion. And some were, but they were so dead set against it that it wasn't going to happen that they didn't even look out into the future to say, what if it does? Now, Rose's opinion is this. I believe that when it was announced, it was talking about the deficit, not about jobs. And so to me, why don't we do both? Let's leave EB5 alone, let it continue to make jobs. And if they want to do something to decrease the deficit, we already have alphabet soup like crazy with these visas, with H-1B, EB. I can't even keep track of them all. So why don't we just have a new one called the G or whatever? And then, but that's my opinion. I kind of put you on the spot here. You can say no comment if you want, but what are your thoughts on this, Jordan?
Sure. Well, to echo that conference and their panel, I don't think anything is going to happen. Um, and part of the reason for that is, yeah, I'll get to the flip side of that. I promise I will.
Okay.
Um, Part of the reason is they were supposed to come out with bullet points and processes, steps 2 weeks after they announced it at the end of February. It's been almost 7 months now. I I think it's probably going to be another 7 months, and we're going to be in the same situation. But let's look at what happens if they do pass it, and
Mhm.
and always just try to look at this conservatively and in worst case scenarios. First and foremost, he can't kill EB5 through an executive order. It's part of the Immigration Nationality Act. So it would need to be approved through legislation in Congress, then move to the Senate, and then get signed by President Trump. Again, EB5 is a very bipartisan program. I don't think senators and congressmen and women alike are going to put their necks out there for projects that are in their own districts that developers make a lot of money and they have a lot of money to donate to political campaigns. So I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. But even if, let's just assume he's able to propose legislation that kills EB5 and replaces it with the gold card, then we're looking at that grandfathering provision. And
Mm.
investors who file under the current law are subject to the regulations at the time at which they filed. So they file today and the program changes in 6 months or is taken away, they'll still be processed. Now, I don't think that's likely. And I think the likeliest scenario is maybe somewhere in the middle because based upon the assumptions of, I think he might have said like 1 million people doing $5 million, you got to keep in mind this is paying down the deficit. That's a donation. It's not an investment. Where EB5, hopefully you get that money back. With this gold card, it would be paying down the deficit, which is great. But how many people, if you had $5 million to just throw away, and yeah, you get some benefits, tax advantages out of that. How much net worth do you need to be able to sustain that? Is it 100 million? Is it 500 million? Is it 5 billion? I'm sure that answer is different for everybody and their needs. I don't think there's 1 million people who are going to be able to just do that. I think maybe there's a few thousand, and then when you factor in that, that's maybe a couple 100 billion to pay down the deficit. And if they wanted to cut their nose in spite of their face and kill EB5, that brings in billions every single year. I just don't think that's likely. So I think to your point, the median would be somewhere in the middle. They have this G visa or golden card program, and then they also continue with EB5 because they both serve very different functions. And I mean, so many of our clients, they're, I don't mean this in a derogative term, but they're scrapping together every little penny they can to create a future for their family. 5 million, which is more than 5x that number, that's a completely different profile of a client.
Mhm.
So they both target different segments and both provide different goals, etc.
Oh, Jordan, I really, and guys, aren't you happy he brought that to the table? To be honest, Jordan, that was a better answer than I heard in Miami out of the whole panel. Because your experience and your skills in understanding finance and understanding that, a lot of us aren't familiar or comfortable with that much money. Like you deal with millions of dollars all the time in your business, and you kind of look at it objectively, like, okay, so if these people do that, this is going to happen. If these people invest that kind of money, that's more of a donation rather than an investment. And we didn't really talk about that much on that podcast, and we are going to wrap it up here. But that these people who do invest in EB5, they get their money back.
Always the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
And that's
obviously,
not true on the gold card, right?
to mine, I mean, where if
So
they're
far.
paying
I mean,
down the
it's
deficit, if they're paying down the deficit, where are they coming up with the money to
the other.
repay? That's
No,
going to add, instead of having a $15 trillion deficit, now we're having a 30 million. I don't know, Ponzi
right.
scheme.
They can't do that. It doesn't make sense. Well, you are a breath of fresh air in this space. I really, really appreciate your background and your skills and your knowledge and your way you break it down so that even this blonde-haired, blue-eyed podcast host can understand it. So thank
Oh,
you so much.
it's my pleasure, Rose. I appreciate you having me on. It was very nice chatting with you and answering your questions, all really good questions. And what I would tell to anyone who's listening, whether developer, potential investor alike, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Just feel free to reach out. Any question you have, no matter how simple or complex, we're here to answer it. And you know, what I often tell folks is if you end up selecting our project or not, it really makes no difference to me. We're going to fill our projects regardless. We're one of the larger groups. We have a ton of spaces and good opportunities. What I find reward and self-vindication in is just pointing people in the right direction. If I shared a perspective that helped you along the way, then I'm doing my job and I can sleep at night. So once again, thank you so much for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to answer some of these questions.
Well, we really appreciate it too. Well, hey, everybody. Wasn't that great? Well, we are going to close out this podcast and we will see you next time on Bullish on Business. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Oops.